So, thanks for coming to Waterstones Nottingham, everybody. We've really loved hosting all these panel discussions for this LGBTQ fest that we've been doing in association with Global Wordsmiths and Writing Proud and Bold Strokes books. And yeah, this one is about, well, the whole theme of today, quite loosely, is sort of genre fiction. And he was going to be my next point, but anyway, the theme of today has been genre fiction, and we've looked at sci-fi and fantasy, romance, and we are now going to be looking at the theme of heroes and villains, which is really quite exciting. So first up, we'd like to introduce the authors. So we've got Sam Skyborn here to my right, to my left even. I'm the most right there is. And Robin Nix, and we have Jodie Clare as well. So please give them a warm welcome. And now with each of you, welcome back. So, what I was going to say, we've got the good guys and the bad guys, and this is the goodest boy of all. And we are very pleased to have him. So if you could just sort of tell me one by one, just introduce yourselves and what sort of thing you write. It doesn't matter if it covers many genres, just give us a little intro to your work.
Well, I've written 3 books. The first one was a superhero romance called Simulation. The second one was a crime thriller, detective novel. And the third one is the sequel to the second one, which is also a crime/psychological thriller set in South Africa. I haven't quite found my niche yet. I'm trying my hand at a bit of romance at the moment, so we'll see how that goes. So, yeah.
I've got all 5 books out at the moment. 6 has just gone to my editor. My first was a thriller crime. The next 3 was a sci-fi trilogy, but that dealt with the darker side of human nature. My follow-up to that was a nice pure romance, but it featured a character from my trilogy that suddenly leapt off the page and decided she wanted her own story. And then the one I've just finished is an adventure story, so you think Lara Croft with bigger biceps and smaller breasts.
Sold.
I have written 11 novels, so I published 10, the 11th and 12th are waiting to come out. The first lot was my debut novel. So yeah. My debut series is a 7-book series, which is a thriller, Bruce Patterson sort of style with a supernatural twist. It was marked as the X-Files crossed with Orange is the New Black. And it basically it changed into an adventure, so it is a thriller with crime, but the main character came off the page. So that's would wait for book 7 with that. I have written a few light-hearted romances, and including a series set in France, and yes, thanks, Bill.
That's his favourite.
Yes, he likes that one. There's a golden retriever in it as well. And the one two that are currently waiting to come out is the finishing one of the first series, and one which is my first British psychological crime thriller with a romantic intrigue twist, which takes off my policing experience. So you get to see, as with these ladies, there's always plenty of villainous people in my books as well. So we like naughty ladies, basically.
Nice, that leads quite well to one of my I suppose the question I most want to know is heroes and villains. We're quite it's quite an established trope of having the goodie and the baddie, and lots of people have enjoyed playing with mixing the two and having the anti-hero and whatnot. What do you find more fun to write? Which side of human nature do you find it easier to put on the page?
Stop that end.
Okay, Jodie, how about you?
Well, I have both sides of it. So basically, I love writing an unreliable narrator who is So the first book I ever wrote was basically a psychopath with a multiple personality disorder who became the hero of the book. So I get you to cheer for a serial killer, which won't see the light of day for good reason. Whereas Aaron is basically out and out all good. She heals people through love. I love writing her, and then so I kind of like playing with both, because I find that in a book, if I've got a really good person, I've got to have a really naughty person to offset it, and they kind of give each other energy. But I like giving you the base layer of a character, the facet of them, and completely twisting it. So because my favourite thing is never judge a book by its cover, obviously, and to peel back the layers. So by the time you finish the book, you know the people. So regardless of the story is the fun part, but the characters should stay with you really beyond when you close the book.
Because they make the story drive it, really.
Yeah.
How about you, Robin?
Oh, I love heroes, but I also love to write about the darker side of human nature and people. So in my debut novel, which I'm going to be reading you a little bit from, I've got a heinous female villain who likes to skin people and then have sex afterwards. But there's a, you know...
Wait, with them?
No, not with the dead people. That's a step
It's
too
a whole
far.
other niche genre we're not covering.
That's a step too far even for me, to be fair. But because she's got a point of view, you get more of an in-depth insight into why she is the way she is and what she does and why she does it. In my Extractor trilogy, I've got all three. So the hero, the fabulous hero, then the anti-hero, and then the villain, particularly in Escape in Time. And my anti-hero starts off as a hero, and then through the arc of the 3 books becomes what is essentially a villain, but actually is an anti-hero because she believes what she's doing is for the greater good. And then that turns, and eventually there's redemption in there. But I do love writing a good hero. I grew up on Knight Rider and the A-Team and Street Hawk, and I was like, I want to be in there. I want to see lesbians doing those cool things. I want to be, flying Airwolf or whatever it was and zooming around I want to see me in those books, in those movies and those TV series. So I think that's why I write over-the-top heroes, because that's what I want to see. And I think as women, we're more than capable of doing that. So yeah, I like both. I do like to play with dark people though too.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I guess I don't really think of my characters necessarily always in terms of black and white. I think in a similar way, I like the idea of introducing somebody to an audience and almost forcing that audience to judge that person. And during the course of the story, allowing the readers to get to know that person and see their perspective and hopefully find a way of redeeming that character for themselves in their understanding. And yeah, I like writing both sides. I like playing with dark people, absolutely, but sometimes they don't seem as dark initially as they are in the end. Yeah.
You get really into it, then you just get into the dark side, making darker and darker as you go.
Absolutely.
Sounds fun. So maybe we should start with, we should have a reading. So Sam, do you want to go first?
Sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about the book as well that you're reading from?
So I'm going to be reading from my most recent novel called Alice, which is this psychological drama set in South Africa, or South African thriller. Psychological thriller even, which is the second book in the Tony Mendez series. I'm not going to read you one of the villainous sections because it would give the plot away, so I've just chosen a sweet little piece to give you a taste. So just to give you a little bit of background, in the first novel, Tony Mendez discovers that she's actually been in love with her best friend for many, many years. And the second novel takes off from there. They're trying to build their relationship to the next level. And Tony's wanting to take it to that extra step. So that's just prior to this extract. Tony opened her front door and paused before stepping inside. Since her flat had been ransacked during the Ransom Evans case, at the start of the whirlwind journey that resulted in her and Lisbeth finally getting together, she had hardly been back there. Come to think of it, even prior to all that happening, she used to spend at least 3 nights out of 7 at Lisbeth's. Her flat felt quite alien now, like something from a distant dream, a different time. As she slowly advanced into the room, her mind flashed back to the night it all happened. She remembered arriving and finding the flat door ajar, and feeling the feeling of fear and shock, scrambling in the dark for Hilary her hockey stick, in case the intruders were still inside. She remembered finding the big, bloody red letters slapped on the white walls, and the weeks afterwards it took for her to apply enough layers of whitewash to make them disappear. She grimaced at the irony. Obviously, the fates knew more about her then than she could ever have imagined. Without stopping to engage with any of the usual things in her flat, she headed straight for the little fridge freezer in the corner. She was there for one thing, and one thing only. She lifted the flap to the freezer compartment that housed only one item, a small white plastic ice tray. She grabbed the tray and nudged it left and right to loosen it from where it had frozen in place. With a crunch, it came away from the thick frosted walls. She pulled it free and placed it on the side of the sink. She jammed the rubber plug firmly into the plug hole, filled the kettle, and switched it on. Then, just for safety, she grabbed a tea towel and placed it across the bottom of the sink, over the plug hole. Carefully, she turned the bulging ice tray on its head in the middle of the plot. Once the kettle boiled, she poured the piping hot water onto the back of the ice tray and listened to the satisfying crack and squeak as the ice melted and clumped into the tea towel. She turned over the ice tray to make sure all the cubes had been dislodged, and then removed it from the sink. She poured the remaining hot water over each of the ice cubes, watching them melt away, until she spotted the one she was looking for. She focused the rest of the hot water on that one. Once all the ice had melted, she reached down and lifted from the water a little lump that remained. Holding it up between her thumb and forefinger, it was a 7-carat rough diamond with no visible flaws. Shaped in an oval, so it could be cut into one large oval gem or 2 smaller, equal twins. This diamond was the only thing she had from her mother when she died. Her father had got rid of everything else that reminded him of his beloved wife. The stone had apparently been passed down to her mother from Tony's grandfather, and so her dad had told her. When Tony first left home and entered the police force, she'd had the rock valued, intending to make sure her household insurance covered it adequately. Sadly, there was no way in a million years she could afford the astronomical premium demanded. Then one day, while she was drinking whiskey on ice in the pub, she drained the glass. One of the cubes slid down and bumped her on the nose, providing a proverbial eureka moment. So then she goes off to meet Lisbeth and tries to propose. That unfortunately doesn't go quite according to plan, except not exactly her plan. So she decides to take some time out and accepts the case, which is the main case in this book, of trying to find a missing person in South Africa. So the next little extract I will read to you is just one of the missing person Alice's adventures in South Africa. If that's all right.
Yeah, cool.
Thursday, 9th of November, South Africa. By 7:30 a.m., Alice and Gloria were heading out of the flat towards Gloria's banged-up beige Citroen. Gloria drove them out of the Green Point, skirting the edge of Cape Town's City Bowl and onto the M2, past Observatory, and out to Kailicha, which Gloria had explained was situated on Cape Flats, bordering False Bay. Kailicha means our new home, Gloria said, as she took the turn off to the M2. It's spread over a large portion of the Cape Flats and divides it up into various sections or parts, each separately named and each quite different once you get to know them. As they headed further out of the city, the suburbs gave way to a large open land, and then, like a mirage ahead of her, a vast, unbelievably dense settlement of eclectic dwellings emerged, ranging from brick-built, quite smart, large middle-class houses with fancy Mercedes-Benz parked on brick-paved driveways, to tiny, rickety shacks with gaps for windows and corrugated iron roofs. Where exactly are we going? To the shelter, Gloria said. We're almost there. Gloria slowed the Citroen and took a right turn onto a dirt track that cut into an even poorer part of the town. Like a surgeon's knife on soft skin, the car cleaved a slow, cautious, red dusty line along the track, past a sea of scrap metal, aerials, rotting wood pallets that were cobbled together with rusted nails, and fishing line to form a mass of dilapidated shacks. About 400 metres on, Alice caught sight of a slightly larger construction in the natural clearing created by a perimeter of debris. The curious construction was made of a large marquee tent that had been modified, abutted, propped up, elongated, and reinforced with various wooden, metal, and fabric additions, creating extensions on either side. Alice guessed the debris and bits of rubble all around were what remained of a building that had been plundered for scraps and recyclable components. As they turned off the track and headed along the side of the marquee tent, Alice noticed a little brown girl, no more than 4 or 5 years old, sitting on a small upturned bucket, sheltered from the hot sun in a sliver of shade that remained. The little girl, surprisingly, had shoulder-length, straight black hair and big brown eyes. She watched them intently, with an impassive expression. As they slowly drove past, a sudden loud thud against the side of the car made Alice jump. A little boy had shot out in front of them, and at first she'd feared the car had hit him. It was a huge relief to find the thud was caused by a football that had bounced against the side of the Citroen. As the boy recognized the car, his face cracked into the largest toothy grin Alice had ever seen. He whooped and shouted something incomprehensible back towards where he had appeared from. Within seconds, a small football team of young boys and girls swarmed around the Citroen. They were laughing and chatting excitedly while jogging next to the car as Gloria drove it round to the other side of the tent into a barren dust bowl. Once Gloria had parked, she got out of the car and was instantly swamped by the children trying to hug her. Meanwhile, Alice received a wary, curious glances. "This is my friend Alice, everyone," Gloria said. "Say hello." "Hello, Alice," came the enthusiastic sing-song chorus. Alice smiled and said her own, hopefully friendly-sounding hello. Then she noticed that the little girl who had been sitting on the upturned bucket was now clutching the side of the tent, partly hiding, partly watching the procession. "Who is she?" Alice asked. Gloria glanced over. "Oh, that's little Masika. She's very shy and keeps very much to herself." Alice smiled at Masika and then followed Gloria and her human skirt of small people into the tent.
That's such a, what I've got from that passage is such a clear evocation of the city, of the landscape in South Africa. Do you find that the setting is important for you when you're writing and helping you even to form the characters? Would you say that it helps to form those heroes and villains and anti-heroes that you write about?
I do believe that the locations tend to reflect some of the themes within the characters of, the villains and the heroes. But I also, specifically in Alice, I think South Africa in itself was very much a character in itself, because it had, I suppose, like any country really, has good parts, bad parts, things that change, things that affect the people that live in them rightly or wrongly. So yeah, I think South Africa very much in this book is a central character for me in writing it.
Do you guys play with settings and how do you're definitely nodding, Jodie.
I don't think they reflect my characters as much, because my characters tend to come first within a plot, and then I decide where to take those characters. Then evoking that setting correctly will reflect this character, but it doesn't work in terms of the setting decides what my characters are going to be. Character comes first.
Yeah.
But Jodie,
for me sometimes, because I don't know whether you find that sometimes when you're in a setting, the setting itself becomes an extra character. And sometimes, like you said, does relay parts of the story it depends how you do it around. Like for instance, with Aaron series, I didn't know which part of America it was going to be set in, so it's different. So the setting's not as important as the thing. Whereas like in my most recent book, The Manor House, the manor, Hayfield Manor is atmospheric, you know, it encompasses its owner, so it's more like, you know, kind of like taking off how Disney did things, you know, things like with Beauty and the Beast, when you see the castle and the beast is the beast, the castle is imposing, yet as you go throughout the book, the castle itself comes to life and is healed itself. So it just, like you said, sometimes the character needs to be first. Well, and it always does, you know, the story and the character needs to be first. But sometimes that setting just talks to you in a way. I don't know whether you find that, and just brings out an extra level that you weren't expecting.
Well, that example you gave was beautiful, actually, about Beauty and the Beast, to use the castle, because we all recognise, even when you're watching the Disney movie, you recognise that castle is almost a reflection of his character and what's going on, and there's a sort of dark and brooding, and everything's clearly left to rot.
Yeah.
So, Robin, you were talking about one thing I really loved that you said, and I really want to focus on actually, is that you're watching things like Knight Rider and A-Team and stuff, and then you were like, well, there's no lesbians in it, I'm going to put one in. So did you, when you started writing, actually this applies to all of you, when you started approaching the genres that you were writing in, was it because you felt there was a lack of representation and you just thought there was this gap we have to plug?
I think for me it's come as a natural progression. So my first one was a story that I had to write, and it came to me, and then my main character had to be an ex-Navy SEAL in order to save the day at the end of the book. The trilogy, it was all about the hero, and as I built that hero, all of that stuff from my childhood kind of came into play for it. So I think it was because, like you say, I wasn't seeing those characters on TV. You do a little bit more now. I mean, you've got Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel now, but still, like Wonder Woman, you know, when she was training when she first came to train for the movie, her trainer said she had one wrist that went all the way up to her shoulder. You know, so she was skinny, and she's supposed to be able to throw people around and, you know, fight the guys. And realistically, without superpowers, you can't do that unless you're of a certain build. And you don't see that. In Wonder Woman, you saw the backing characters, the tertiary characters, as being, you know, real life bodybuilders and athletes. But up front and centre, you don't see muscular women because it's not acceptable. Socially, people don't want to see it because it's not feminine. And I disagree entirely. I don't think to be called feminine or a woman, you have to have a certain kind of body, or project in a certain way, or wear certain clothes. And so that's Landry. She's, you know, built like a brick shithouse. she's 5'10", she's fearless, she holds her own with a guy, but if in my head I can see her, so it wouldn't be, you wouldn't think, oh, she can't take him on. Yes, she can, because she is built like this. She's not stick thin, and it's not unrealistic. So that's kind of where what I wanted to see, and it was what I wanted to write, because I wanted to read that. But also, I mean, the whole trilogy is about mental and physical health, as well as, you know, all good sci-fi delves into that sort of real life human nature.
So for you, it wasn't just a case of the sexuality aspect of it, it's more the representation in terms of physicality as well. That's a kind of woman you don't see.
And women, as strong women. To me, it doesn't matter about sexuality or any of that. It's just women, strong women. And it's a theme that I circle. You find as a writer, you circle themes, and it's a theme I circle: gender, presentation, and strong women.
And it's also the active women. So up until probably about, I don't know, a decade ago, even though we had central female characters, they still somehow seemed passive. They weren't the ones that were the murderers or the, not that I necessarily want them all to be villains, but they didn't do anything. Everything happened to them. Yeah. Well, why can't women be murderers or psychopaths or they're not necessarily in a very sexy way either. Just being, for instance.
Yeah, that's a Hollywood way. You can be a sexy psychopath, but not just a
Sharon Stone basically. But if you look at society in general, and you look, I can't remember the name. It escapes me at the moment, but a film was made of it with Charlize Theron. It's called Monster. I can't remember the name of the lady.
Arlene Wuornos.
Okay. Yeah. So she was lambasted because effectively she was a serial killer, and they didn't take into account her background, and it was just, oh my God, a woman can't do this. Only men are supposed to do this, and it riles me up, as you can tell, because basically we are human beings, and every human being can have the same characteristics in smaller or greater portions. It doesn't make you a man, it doesn't make you a woman. These are just human characteristics.
Yeah. Well, it was even kind of the case with Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, wasn't it? The sort of, for ages, Myra was she was led astray by him, and why couldn't she have also wanted to kill?
She just found a kindred spirit.
Yeah.
Well, that's obviously because when I write books, is that I was as a police officer, I met real life heroes every day, and I mean Aaron in my book is 6'5" and built like Samson.
Samson or Samson?
No, Samson.
She's very square.
Never know she might get Wi-Fi.
Wifey for short.
You have got that side, but then what I've got is that actually she's the very soft side, whereas the little, well, she's 5'7", not little, but a little compared to Aaron, is the military expert, because obviously in the police force there's different types of training which obviously women use to offset physicality, and a lot of female officers are not going to win a prize for Halle Berry and thing, but they're pretty good at doing their job, and I felt that wasn't represented in books in general. I feel like men are not given a chance to be they're just not given a chance to be people. They're stereotypes. So when I wanted characters, I wanted women that could actually do something useful. Women are psychopathic, they are psychopathic. It's scarier for the media and for people when they are faced with women being in that position, because it's like my first book, Hodgers liked it, they didn't like her being a woman. For the simple reason that they felt that people were ready for it, and they got to sell books, so that's they're not there to be a political ally. But that's kind of what we're up against, and what we're slowly, I think all of us together are slowly trying to represent people as representative of society, and that a woman can have abs, and hey, well, it's the same as the Greatest Showman, isn't it? A woman can have a beard and still be cool. I've got a beard. But it's kind of this feminine thing where you have to be perfect, and this imperfection is what makes us beautiful and human.
Yeah, that's lovely, isn't it? That's all. If we all leave with one thought, that's... Do you want to tell us about your book that you're holding now?
Okay, this is Blackbridge Fall, so this is book 6, which I'm really very mean to my readers in, which I'm not normally. And am I reading?
Yeah, if you like.
So, to give you the background of this, is Aaron has gone from an incarcerated convict. She got convicted of murder because she saw the murder, because she's an empath. So there's obviously the supernatural element of it. And Renee is an undercover officer. and she's a POI, so basically she gets Aaron out of this. She's a psychiatrist and poses as a psychiatrist all the way through. Through the 7 books, Aaron slowly realised that she has feelings for Renee, but it's been an actual real journey of somebody who has been abandoned by the family, abandoned by their society, abandoned by and put in a mental health institution. And so she's become an elite agent of the time. You know, she's 6'5", lumbers around. She's not the sneakiest person, but she somehow, inadvertently, does the right thing because that's what she's trying to do. So in this book, she is with Renee on a thing called Blackbridge Falls, which is where Renee comes from, and her father and brother were lost, and they've been chased all the way around this mountain. And Aaron, at this point, Renee has been shot. They've run to try and get to the rafts, try and get down the mountain, and Aaron has to make a choice, but she also has realised at this point, it's taken her 6 books, but she actually fancies her and loves her, and she's going to do the inevitable Aaron thing and tell her at the completely wrong time. So I'm going to read you a little bit of that and then to finish it off.
Oh, from the end as well, that's novel. Michael.
Yeah, I know. I don't often do it, but it doesn't tell you who the bad guy is, see. So.
Oh.
Okay, so I closed my eyes and said a silent prayer that Zach was holding onto the raft he'd get to safety. Now, I just had to get Renee off the mountain, and she was pale, wobbling, and her eyelids drooping. I downed the rest of the syrupy gunk and nodded to her. Her throat flexed, tears misted her eyes, and she nodded back and held out her hand. Something hit the snow at the top of the peak, bursting into a spray of white. Crashing, rolling, faster, faster, down, rolling. I grinned. The peak has got to run, huh? Flare, Renee said, hope igniting in her eyes. It's hers, their other hero. She yanked my hand, and we sprinted for it. Bam! Bam! I felt the bullet zip past my face, but kept focused on Renee, on running. If she got hit, she'd stop. I had to keep going. Legs burning, lungs burning, throat sore, left arm stinging, pain in my chest, crashing, rolling, faster, faster, bam, bam. Renee dodged and I ducked. Bullets kicked off the snow next to us. Run, run. The woman hissed at Matt, shooting in his direction. He dodged. Had to get a piece of his hat in his hand to bet. Had to get help. This is a memory, by the way. Forgot that bit. Bam. Pain seared through his chest. She gasped like it hurt. He stumbled, crawled. Bam. Pain hit his arm. He had to keep going. He pulled the raft from cover and dropped onto it, gripping on the piece. He had to make sure Renee was safe, and we're out of the memory. Matt still had the breadcrumb when he reached the raft. Renee muttered, dragging me along. Just keep going, Laurie. Keep moving. Bam. Bam. Pain hit my right elbow. Blood oozed out. Renee glanced over her shoulder and slowed. No, I'm fine, I gasped, shoving her forward. It's just a scratch. Faster, faster, rolling, down. Get her, they screamed, angry, bitter. Bam. The tree is ahead, Renee said, shoving me around a boulder. Nearly there. I glanced over my shoulder. He was down. He'd been shooting at us. But who'd shot him? Bam. The bullet zipped by my neck and tickled the hairs. Raft, Renee said, holding me behind a tree. It's there. Bam, bam, rolling, faster, down, down. The other raft is just there, Renee said, and she leaned to reach for it. No, I yanked her hand back. Bam. The bullets pinged off the rock. The rock did look like a castle. Matt had been right. We need both rafts, Renee muttered, her breath in pants. She had a gunshot wound to her right shoulder, 2 to her left leg. She was going to collapse. With both of our weight, we'll get caught. We can't hit the falls on one raft. Bam, bam. The bullet pinged off the rock again. Rolling, faster, closer. Renee, I've got to tell you something. I looked at the rock and back to her, pulled her to look at me. I had to get her off the mountain. You wanted me to talk? Aaron, we're kind of busy right now, she said, dazed, dropping, knees buckling. Tell her you love her, I said, holding onto her arm, grabbing onto a load of snow. Nan might have told me I couldn't heal, but I was going to try. Faster, smashing, building closer. What? She searched my eyes. Her knee buckled. Bam, bam, the bullets were getting closer. Tell the woman you love how you feel. I held her by the shoulders, held her upright. I couldn't let her fade. Tell her. Let her know she's real blessed. Faster, rolling, closer, closer. Renee's breath shortened, her eyes dimming. She studied me, her blonde brow dipped, pale and shaking, yet the most beautiful woman I'd ever set eyes on. Tell her that she's real blessed and she's a dimwit for not seeing how you feel, I whispered, my heart struggling to keep up. I am getting you off this mountain. I held up her hand, rope tied to the raft and to her wrist. Aaron, no. I pressed my lips to hers and put every ounce of love I had for her into it. I focused sucking the hurt right out of her, relived each bullet hitting her, the pain, the panic. I shone every single loving moment I could muster. Serenity, Oppidum, St. Jude's, Caprock, Baltimore, Pennsylvania, here, right here. I'd loved her the second I set eyes on her, and I wanted her to feel it, to know how she made me feel. Energy shot from me into her. Pain hit my chest, my leg, and I pulled back. I met those grey eyes I loved, that smile that filled my stuttering heart. I love you. I threw her and the raft into the river. I stepped out to cover her, protect her, like she'd always done for me. Bam.
That's great.
So that, yeah, so basically has gone up the mountain there. I've still got another little bit to read. You okay with that?
Oh, sorry, yes,
But,
yeah, no.
So that was me being mean, sorry. I like leaving cargos. But at that point, we don't know how Aaron is. But we then cut to the final chapter view in Aaron. Everybody has their own mountain to climb. The early spring rain pelted me as I was half led, half dragged from the bus. I'd forgotten how hard it was to walk tied up. My heart skipped every couple of beats and I looked up to the grey concrete I knew well, too well. They'd patched me up enough to shove me into a court. The judge had said that taking off my ankle bracelet and skipping town showed I couldn't be trusted. He'd asked me why I'd run, and I couldn't answer. He'd asked me why I was with Zach, who's a little boy, by the way, and I couldn't answer. He'd asked me how I was hurt, and I couldn't answer. What could I say? If I told him I'd been recruited by SIG because I had freaky skills, it wouldn't have helped none. I couldn't say a word. He said he was going to put me back inside prison because he felt I looked like I wasn't coping. He said that I could hurt myself or someone else, and what could I say? He was kind of close to the truth with my burdens. I looked down at the orange outfit and rubbed at my aching chest. The rain fell cool on my brow and I closed my eyes to it. Spring rain. It would have been nice to have regained the energy to be healed by it, by water, but my heart skipped instead. I shuffled along in line, trying not to stumble. I'd met Renee in Serenity Hills, and I'd never expected to leave. But since I had, I'd learned so much. I'd learned to believe in my blessings, to trust in the people around me, to trust myself, to keep going when someone needed me. And I found that my heart wasn't so detached, that I could feel, that I could be in love, that I was in love with Renee. No prison blocked that joy. It was like my heart had known it when I first walked into her office and she kicked me out. It had been some climb to help her with her dad and Zach, a real struggle to get them to the rafts, and Zach and I had been there to help. But she had looked her mountain in the face and hiked its butt. Yeah, the thought of her filled me with strength. Like she said, love was a lot like hiking up a mountain. While I'd gone wobbling up Love's mountain, gone through all the mist and hazards, only to realise the only way I got up there was through feeling, not sight. Just like she'd said, I hadn't even known I was climbing. I stepped inside the familiar walls of Serenity Hills Mental Institution. The guards hadn't really changed, and neither had the smell, the feel, or the echo of the place. And I was sick, too sick to stand for long. My chest was heavy, and my knees wobbled. Beaten, battered, but blessed. Renee, my family, and the honorary families I'd found along my journey, they were all worth being back there. Love was armour. I stumbled to the check-in desk, and the guard looked up, then up again, until she met my eyes. She asked me a load of questions, searched me, but only she wouldn't find the breadcrumb. That was in my bra. Renee taught me that. And I'd hide it in the roof of my mouth when they showered me. I'd learned a lot from the first time I'd been inside. The cold grey of the place, the chill, the barred windows were familiar. Life had taught me a load of things, but love had taught me more. I hoped Renee would tell the lady she loved how she felt. I wanted her to be happy. I needed her to be. I'd climbed a mountain I never thought I'd get to crest. And wherever Fry, Renee, Aunt Bess, my mom, every heart that filled me with joy, I hoped they weren't too mad at me and they weren't worrying too much. Love meant strength and weakness, like a mountain strong and tall yet humbled by the moods of nature. And like mountains, there was something flowing through me like a stream, like living water. Love. There was fight in me yet. I know.
So one thing I was going to ask, so you all write these sort of extraordinary women. Do you find yourselves consciously drawing on aspects of yourselves, or even women you know, to create your characters, both good and bad?
I'd love to say I'm secretly a superhero. I think it's a combination of things. Obviously, we all draw from our extended lives and experience, but I think there's, especially for me, because there aren't that many role models out there, or haven't been, not ones that I could identify with. So yes, I also watched A-Team and the whole 70s, 80s gambit. But as a woman, it's one has to create that person.
It's still a battle, isn't it?
It is a battle, because because society, one tends to lose confidence every now and again. You think, well, going back to Monster, should I really make, will people like my character if I do make them, that bad or that good, or there's always a kind of a self-regulation or self-regulatory process in that writing, because you're looking at your books or your characters via society's eyes.
I think it's tempting when you start writing to put yourself on the page, but I think the more you write, your characters should be three-dimensional. They should live in your brain in their own right. They should, I'd say, sleep by you in your bed. They should be at your desk. They should be with you the whole time you're writing, and they should be fully formed, which means they can't be the other people or bits of the other people. They've got to be a character in their own right. They've got to be a human being in their own right. So whilst I think you can't say, oh no, I haven't, put a little bit of something in, because we're all inspired by people around us and little bits and tics and behaviours and the way people use their hands when they speak, all that sort of thing. You pick those things up and then you think, oh, that might fit that character. You file it away in a memory bank, and then maybe it comes back, but it has to only be little pieces, because otherwise the characters aren't your own, and they're not right for the story.
And they kind of materialise, don't they, over the course of a novel? So you sort of have this cartoon image of a person, and then by the end of the novel, it's actually she's there. And it's like, now go, it's over. Goodbye.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where your character development comes in, right at the beginning, before you actually start to write. Knowing that character inside out, creating, somebody to drive that story and follow that plot through from beginning to end. If you know them well, then they can drive that story a lot better.
I think, for me, all of the characters, including the naughty ones that do long things, do have elements of me in them. As in, like, for instance, Aaron's spirituality is something, she came from Ignatian meditations that I did. When you're in a bad mood, you can really write a really vicious character. That's the best kind of mood, because you really do want to skin people sometimes. Not literally, but that's kind of, it's like Andy McBride once said, that he used to sit in meetings, and when people used to annoy him, he used to envision how they would be killed in his books.
In his books,
which is
healthy.
That's quite extreme. So there are little things, but I do like, for instance, the character development. Before I even get to writing, there's books and books of A4 of what the story is, what the 5-act structure is, what the characters are going to do, how they feel. So whereas but for me it's the voice. So when the voice is right, it all falls into place. So these little elements just sort of naturally come in. So sometimes you're not expecting, you don't want them to do this. Like I didn't know Erin was 6'5" and built like Samsung, not Samsung. She's got a smartphone. But you have that you take in, and that comes to you, and that's right for you. But then you have to learn to be careful, because for instance for me as a police officer, I have to be careful how I approach some aspects of crime, because you do take stuff in as a writer, you soak up people like a sponge, and then you've got to be really careful. Oh, that sounds like so and so. Maybe I'll change the heck. You do have to be careful.
Yeah, I was talking with a crime writer who said that she wrote one of her ex-colleagues very clearly as one of her murder victims, and that woman no longer speaks to her. So that'd be a lesson to any aspiring women.
Sue her.
Yeah, that's very true. I think they had even the same initials, which got even more. So what would you say makes a great hero and a great villain?
Humanity. Because I think, because basically the dark side of people in life is man's inhumanity to man. That you don't need extra things on top of it. It's the fact that you can choose to open the door for someone who's struggling, or you can choose to close it in their face. It's choice, isn't it? And basically you can go from being a really nice person to being a complete idiot in 2 seconds because you're in a bad mood or whatever. And women make for great heroes and great villains because we are emotional, because we feel, men do too. But we are connected to our feelings in a way. We notice things about people. We're affected when people are mean, which can do both. It can elevate someone to a hero, or it's just like some people, if they've been through bad things, they become good people. They don't want to become a serial killer. They become the opposite in spite of it. Or somebody come from a good upbringing does the opposite. It's humanity.
I think it's context, situation and background, and really making your hero believable, and really making your villain believable. So they are, again, going back to it, human beings, and we're all capable of horrific things, and we're all capable of fabulous things. And that's the theme I tend to circuit, the goodness that people are capable of, but again, that extreme nastiness that people are capable of. So it's that 3-dimensional thing. You can't make a villain caricaturish or over the top, unless they're over the top in, say, a Joker kind of a way from Batman. That was a theatrical mask that he put on, both figuratively and literally. So it's making them believable through that background and that context, so that they're reacting to situations that, like you say, 2 people can go into exactly the same situation and then come out the other side in completely polar opposite directions. So one can then turn to being a doctor without frontiers type thing, and the other person can go to start being a serial killer. And that depends on a lot of things, on who they are as a person, their emotional resilience, their characteristics, their background, what family they had, what friends they've got around them. And you have to build all of that in. And again, I go back to what I said a little while back about the 3D character, 4D character really, that makes them the real hero or the real villain. They have to be more than what they do. So more than saving the day, more than killing the mistress.
Good example.
Why we left.
That's my next book.
I think obviously what they said, I think the only thing I would add is my background is in IT, and I started off in my storytelling career as a computer programmer creating virtual worlds. And the part that I think that I'd like to point out, for me, when I'm writing a character, when I know or when I read a good character, it is when I'm entirely able to immerse myself in that person. And it's an opportunity for a reader to be able to experience being somebody else, whether they're good or whether they're bad. And the more you can facilitate that as a writer and put them in that person's shoes and force them to contemplate via that character doing things they might never have considered possible for themselves, be it good or evil. I think that's, for me, the true essence of a good character. It's kind of a body that I can wear, a person that I can be, as a reader.
Just don't go too far with it and kill the mistress or
Well, I must be able to contemplate it.
There are lines to draw when you're writing, aren't there? Let's just see how that works, shall we?
So when we were touching on this representation, like with Wonder Woman, to see strong women is still such a big thing. Even now, it seems insane to think in 2019 to have a superhero movie with a woman in the lead is quite a big deal. To the point where Rotten Tomatoes had to change the way the site was run so that people could not leave reviews for films they'd yet to see. And a load of fanboys got really angry that they couldn't leave a negative review because she was a woman in a film before the film had actually come out. So what do you think it is about those provoking such extreme reactions? And I imagine your books haven't had such horrible reactions.
Oh, have you?
Have you really?
Absolutely.
Oh, well, tell us all about it.
There actually are a good and evil. You can do it for readers, basically.
There was two parts to that question. Remind me of the first part.
I can't remember either.
No.
No, okay. Why do you think there is that response to strong women being portrayed?
It's socialisation over hundreds of years that have made women the people that should. I know it's slightly different now, but just to make it simple, women are the ones that should stay at home and raise the children and be passive. And then the men are the ones that should go off to war and be the breadwinners. And it's this option of you're born and then you're supposed to be focused on marriage and then not go to university and be a good wife. All those and this is not. And as I say, things have changed now and they're slightly different. But you've still got girls growing up obsessed with pink, because pink is obviously a girl's colour, obsessed with pink and focusing on focusing on this, finding the man that will complete them and then supporting him to do everything that he does. And I know that's a very extreme vision, and I'm not saying that that's what it is, but what I'm saying is if you go back hundreds of years, this is what men have been socialised to believe is their place, and women have been socialised to believe is their place. And a very easy instance of this is the space that women and men take up. So if you go on to, and I can give you a good example actually, but I'll give you a quick example first. You go onto a bus, and an average guy, and there's lots of guys in the audience, so I apologise for this, but your average guy will get on the bus and they'll spread out. And they'll drop their stuff and they'll take a big space. And then a girl will come in, or a woman will come in, and they'll be cross legs and they'll take up this much space. And they don't want to encroach on that space. Yesterday I was at the gym and I was doing a body combat session on my own, basically, in the gym area. And I was doing this punching. So I was taking up a very decent amount of space. And this guy walked past. There was about this much space for him to walk past. There was 100 metres behind me that he could have gone behind me, but he chose to walk in front of me. And he punched him, because I thought, I'm not carrying on with my workout. And he went like that, and then was like, as if I shouldn't have carried on doing it, because he was walking past. And as a man, he takes precedence, and I should have stopped. even though there was all this space behind me that he could have walked by, and he walked the other way on the way back, I can tell you. But so
I was going to say maybe he wanted to be punched. That was his
he came to the right place. So I think it's that socialisation, and this won't change until you educate children at primary school level that there is no gender difference in terms of strength, in terms of job opportunities, in terms of what women and men are supposed to do. And I'm talking in a very binary way, very generalised, but that is another thing. I was very lucky to be brought up in a family where I was allowed to effectively, within reason and rules and boundaries, be who I wanted to be and do what I wanted to do. So I was bought dolls, but if I was playing with my two older brothers Action Man, that was fine, they weren't taken away from me. I played volleyball and basketball instead of netball. So I was allowed to become very comfortable with who I am, which means that I can take up a lot of space on a seat, and I'm happy to be taking up space in the swimming pool, and punching in the gym and all of that sort of thing, and being loud, and being strong and being confident, and not thinking that decreases me as a female. I have no desire to be a man, and it's been levelled at me several times. Are you sure you're not trans? No.
It's
I'm this.
interesting, like
I am
almost a
very
woman could
happy.
not possibly have those characteristics.
Biologically, I'm very happy with what I get a lot of pleasure from what I've got, thank you very much. I don't want to be chopping things off and adding bits in other places.
No.
Said your wife, no.
Yes, absolutely. And I was very lucky. But lots of people aren't that lucky, and lots of people, think, oh, I have to conform. So those men that have grown up with this set of standards, therefore, when they see a strong woman at the helm of a movie like Captain Marvel, and I loved in the Avengers one that she had her hair cut short, because she was stronger, slightly stronger, and she was certainly more physical than Wonder Woman, but she still had the long hair. Which is the, can have long hair. So she can be a bit toned, so she's not too big, but she's got to have long hair. So when she had her haircut in the whatever movie that was, I apologise for the geeks in the thing.
Endgame, Avengers Endgame.
I thought that's brilliant, that's good. So it offends those people, but that's because of how they've been educated and brought up, and that's why they rail against it.
And I find that, like, for instance, trade publishing, the big boys, Hodder and Stoughton, we're continuing trying to batter down walls with them because they sell what they sold before. That's how they sell books. What's out there is what's been sold before, because that's where their money is, and they've got to do it as a business.
Yeah.
But it's kind of that difficult things, like I was told that I should have an androgynous name because more people would buy the book, all that kind of thing. Luckily enough, my middle name was anyway, so I went with it. But I kind of am forever trying to explain to them is that it should be representative of society. So it's not okay to have everything centered around a propaganda, because even people who are, say, for instance, heterosexual, cisgendered, who want to stay home and raise children, they should not have that the only thing on telly for them, the only thing in books for them. It's, when we had Jane Austen and she lived in a English society and they were white, rich people, well, that's okay. But now, how many of you live in an all-white society? How many of you live in an all cisgendered, heterosexual society? Nobody does.
So it's not truly reflective anymore.
No, and the police had to, legally, the police had to recruit for that reason. Whereas we're allowing our arts, which is really weird, because the arts is the campus thing going, really. It's the one place that is, it's okay.
Especially with things like crime, it's mostly women that read it.
Yeah.
So you would think there would be no problem in putting female protagonists in it.
Women don't like seeing, my mum hates it if there's a woman in the book that is too, she likes them because they're different, And I've written them, obviously, because, you know, if she said they sucked, I'd have to throw things at her. Hi, Mum. But if they are... But she doesn't like if a lady's not ladylike. And like, for instance, we got to a point there on the series where she began to explore her sexuality. She stopped reading. It wasn't okay. And it had nothing to do with religion. Nothing to do with... That is a personal... I can't cope with it.
Because you haven't seen it before, probably. You haven't read it before, you haven't come across it before.
It's upbringing. So it's like... It's kind of like that thing where somebody has to go to a hospital in full makeup even though they're really sick. And the doctor goes, you need to take your makeup off because I can't operate on you. And she's like, no, you'll see me with no makeup. And I'm like, but I'm about to see your groin or something. it's like I'm not looking at your face. No.
That doesn't make you a woman then.
No, so it's kind of, it's pointless. It's a pointless thing, isn't it? It's just be you.
Yeah.
Be who you, because that's the only way you can truly be happy is if you're actually you. Because if you try to be somebody else, you repress it, and that's where you get serial killers. That's where you get violent crime. That's why you get people who are very disaffected because they haven't been the chance to grow properly. So they're like the tree that's bent, and you know you can only prop that up so much because it's already grown.
I think it's a question of being you, yes, but there's a little bit more to it for me in the sense that it's about labels and it's about combating labels, and I think at the moment we are in a very turbulent and quite interesting time where our labels are changing. They need to change, yes, absolutely, but you know, you're talking about cisgender versus trans, we're talking about male versus female. If you're not female, then you're male, okay? Or why can you not just be Sam or, you know, Robin, or can you not just be who you are, and that's you know, a certain degree of masculinity, femininity, or whatever we label as that, and kind of incorporate that in our society rather than trying to make sure that we fit into one of those. If we're not one, then the other.
It's clearly too much for us, though, isn't it? It seems like we can't handle it as a species.
Maybe, you know, yeah.
I mean, I'd like to drop feminine and masculine from the dictionary completely.
Yeah.
Or
We're just human characteristics.
Something we battle quite a lot in the bookshop is trying to get people not to gender books, for kids especially. But I've even, I mean, one of the weirdest examples, it comes up quite a lot still, is I'm looking for a gift card but for a 40-year-old man. Like, what's a gift card for a 40-year-old man? It's a gift card. What do you want to, what is it? Is it wielding a hammer? Like,
it's got a W.
It's building.
So if you wander in with a W on
Just
a card,
plain.
then you're in trouble.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, Coca-Cola Zero, that's black because it's appealing to males.
Yeah.
Because Diet Coke was very blatantly aimed at women.
Yeah.
I mean, because you had the gardener that the women were, turning that stereotype on its head.
Sing it.
I can't remember it.
It's also about language, though, because yes, let's remove male and female, but it also then poses the problem when you are writing. I don't know if you find this as well. Then how do you go about describing? Because obviously I don't want to engage in those stereotypes, but we haven't quite developed a language capable of embracing the multifaceted nature.
And it confuses, because our job, isn't it? Like, for instance, you have somebody who is a non-binary character. You sometimes have somebody who uses he and she a lot, and they change it, or they use they. And what you get is
Have you tried to write the they?
With 2 days.
What happens is you inevitably get a writer who goes, I don't know who's speaking. Every reader's going, I don't know who's speaking.
I don't.
It's like, what happened? But that we don't have, unlike, say, for instance, German or French or one of the Latin languages, there's no neutral, there's no das, there's no lay, there's that, and unfortunately, so it is hard from a writer, because, when I'm teaching writing or whatever, you have somebody who's trying that and you want to applaud that, and you use the, they is become the accepted, we understand what you're on about. But it's just incredibly difficult because readers have to give you the chance to do those things, to change things, but you have to get readers on board in order to do that, and readers can be difficult, like those guys who have never read a book, never watched the film and hate it, You have, I mean, they do that with names, don't they? If there's two
Yeah.
names that they think are rivals in books, they'll purposely go and trash the one they don't like. Because they're funny. You know, so.
Yeah. Well, I think we could chat about this all day, but I'm conscious I want to hear from your book as well. So Robin next is going to be really pulling us into the 21st century by reading off a laptop.
And a strong woman off a laptop.
And a strong everything. We're not going to be able to cope with this. So would you like to tell us? Would you like to tell us about the book first of all?
I will. Yeah. So I'm going to read from Never Enough, which is basically a tale of an out Hollywood movie star, female, who's top of her game, which is obviously, very unusual. And then an investigative journalist who is also top of her game. How they come together, because they wouldn't normally, because investigative journalists in Hollywood fluff, but because my movie star is actually involved in human trafficking and trying to battle human trafficking and things. And my investigative journalist starts following a trail on organ trafficking and a gang led by a particularly unpleasant woman.
Is this the one you love?
Yes.
The heinous lady?
Yes, absolutely. So it's her name's Therese Hunt. Yes, no, she doesn't sell people, it's organs. She's like the eBay for organs. So, she gets whatever you need for, if you've got the money, she can get it for you, basically. Yeah, absolutely.
Bit of
so, okay. So it's only a nice little short one. So Therese watched from the garden as FBI Special Agent John Reed scurried up the steps of the Walt Disney Concert Hall with a thick padded brown envelope clutched in his right hand. She knew he'd be relieved they were meeting in a public place. Nat had said he was suitably anxious for his own safety after their last conversation with him. She'd taken the time to explain that his prominent position within the agency was no deterrent for her. Criminal, innocent or lawman, she didn't discriminate. He thought she was a crazy bitch. She'd seen it in his eyes when he'd witnessed firsthand her penchant for sadistic torture and killing. Crazy was unpredictable and volatile. Crazy didn't care for consequences. The knowledge of her downright disregard for the law made people more pliable and responsive to her demands, and Reed was no different. She headed back to the outdoor stage and paused at the Lillian Disney fountain. She didn't care much for public art. It all seemed so condescending, the so-called creatives of the world trying to bring great art to the attention of the ignorant masses, or rather what they thought was great art. But she did have a particular fondness for this one, a massive rose made from 8,000 broken tiles and 200 smashed vases. She liked the idea of destroying something that was already beautiful to make something even more so. And she enjoyed the occasional sharp feeling of the rose's curves beneath her fingers as she caressed its oversized petals, threatening to make you bleed if you touched it just the wrong way. For over a decade since its creation, Therese had considered it a tribute to herself.
Conscious I don't even know how long we've been talking for because of just love chatting with them. But does anybody have questions from the audience? Anybody? No? Oh, yes.
Similar to what we were talking about earlier with the Kill Your Gays group, there's a long-standing kind of literary tradition of the villains being either kind of queer-coded or explicitly queer, so like the Disney villains being the camp ones, or there's a Bill, I think it's Silence of the Lambs, where they link the transgender to the villainy. How do you feel your writing stands either in relation, evolution, separate from that kind of idea, and where we kind of got to with that now?
That character came from, it was originally a man in a different book. Basically, I'd written a book that had about 8 main characters, Games of Thrones kind of, lots of main characters, they were all over, which meant I wasn't going deep enough into 2 main characters. So she was actually she wasn't a man, she was the sidekick to the male villain. And then as I took the 2 main characters and made, to populate this book, this novel, I decided to take Therese out, and in that one she was actually straight. And I took her out of that and put her in here, and she became a completely different character. And it was a conscious decision to reflect that rather than making her a man. Because even though I'm a lesbian, even though I'm not a man hater, so I didn't want this character to be a man, and he wasn't a man. The character, she was a woman. The character I needed in this book, in this story, to drive this part of the plot was female. And I didn't want to make her straight, because she wasn't straight. When she came to me, she wasn't straight. So I'm not going to change it to make her straight, or to make her a straight male, in order to fit some, or to rail against a stereotype. I didn't actually want to make it a stereotype male character, because it is more realistic to explore that we are all capable of all of these things. And it goes back to that thing of, as human beings, we're all capable of all of these things, regardless of gender, sexuality, any of that. So whilst I recognise, that basic instinct, Roxy was bisexual. Well, Sharon Stone was, I can't remember what her character's name, Catherine Trammell. Yeah, she was bisexual, but Roxy was sort of bisexual, but maybe, and she turned out to be the crazy psychotic one, and obviously so was Sharon Stone. But I didn't see it as a problem in this, because to have changed her to be either male or a female straight woman wouldn't have been true to the character that came to me and to the story. And how it developed, and how she develops with relation to the other characters in the book. So I know what you're saying, but it's also the thing with lesfic, and I think we'll touch on this tomorrow in our panel with romance, is that expectation of happy endings and how people should act within those things. I've seen reviews where people have put books down because there's cheating in it, and there should have been a trigger warning. Why should there be a trigger warning? This is real life, but the problem is,
it's fiction.
I don't think the lesbian community is ready for real life. We're still railing against the well of loneliness. All of these characters in pulp fiction novels where they were gay for a little while, but then they either went into a mental institution, or they went back to the man, or they were terribly unhappy, or they committed suicide. And I think we're still very deep into railing against that. 20, 30 years down the line, I think lesbian fiction will generate, or evolve rather, into something more realistic and more representative of actual lives, where you can have people that skin people, or women that skin, not that that's acceptable. Smartphones, well-built smartphones, women that kill people, and women that cheat, and that's acceptable, because that is representative. And I think this is why I've had quite a backlash from the lesfic community, is because I see it as my job to bear witness to a reality, and I'm not going to shy away from that, and that's, that can be and to not shy away from that. And I think if I did dumb down, if I did fade to black, Escape in Time is set in World War II. The mission is set in World War II. It's in the only female concentration camp that ever was, in Ravensbrück. I started to write that, and I stopped, and I said to Bray, I need to go to Berlin. So we travelled, and we went up to there so I could get a real sense of it, so I could do it justice. Now, in the book, there's a very unpleasant scene of a doctor operating, and because they used the Jews as test subjects to put shards of metal and shards of wood into their bodies to see how soldiers could react and how they could sort out it on the field. So there's a scene in that. I'm not going to fade to black. This is reality. And when I was starting to write that, there was a survey in the Telegraph of so many hundreds of people, and they'd asked questions about World War II, and people were saying they thought Hitler was on England's side. They didn't know Russia were involved in the war. They didn't know anything about it. So, and this is our history that's slipping. I know. And it's slipping away. So whilst I realise I'm only writing lesfic and that that's not supposed to be literary fiction, I still think we need to reflect our realities and our history in that, so they're not lost. And if people want to come at me for that, then that's fine. But I'm not going to dumb it down. I'm not going to fade to black. I don't put it in there gratuitously. I don't put it in there for shock value. It's in there because it's happened.
Yeah.
And it happens.
Here.
Yeah.
Word.
You also can't just not have queer villains, I think, just in case it's offensive to...
I think as a writer, obviously this is a definite issue for us, but I think the point is the character, the story ultimately dictates what that person is going to be. It does affect us, but it affects us more in the reviews, where people suddenly jump to conclusions, or they decide to, it just doesn't meet the expectation, which is also why I have a battle with genre identification, because lesfic generally, has a very predefined box and recipe, and if you write anything that's outside of that, it is very difficult to convince your readers to pick up the book in the first place, not to read it and then, with my novels, I don't know what your experience has been, but people want to know whether do they live happily ever after? Is it a romance? No, it isn't. And then once you can convince them to read the book and then tell me then they love it. But because it's not a stereotypical, the expectation is not being met just by the cover, they don't, want to engage with it.
Well, with me, I use neuroscience, so I'm into neuroscience. So Dr. James Fallon's interest about things like psychopathy and things, which is actually a darkening, less electrical current within the amygdala of the brain, basically. Whereas somebody with depression or OCD, the more anxious things, mood disorders as well. I hate disorder, but you have more electrical. So that basically it's literally just a glitch. And I was fascinated by this. So when I create a villain, the brain comes first. And sometimes, like for instance, the first one I ever wrote with the she was a psychopath with it's not called multiple personality disorder, it's defective something identity disorder or something now. But she had done that because she had a brain injury, which is something I live with. And when you have a brain injury, first of all, it's an extremely vicious thing to deal with. Your brain is not right, and it's been rattled, and it takes a long time. So I used that experience to do that. So she was a straight woman, basically, with a multiple personality disorder, and she was the main character of the book. But Iran series, it's mainly I use it as a society's version. It's basically about slave trading. She takes down slave traders, unwittingly and meaning to. And what it is, it's society's expectation. That's what the actual theme is. It's society's expectation of a person that if they are disabled, if they are different, they do not belong. So although Sam Casey in the first book and in a lot of the books is the bad guy, and he is psychopathic, so he's born with that. He's not there because he's male, if that makes sense. He's not there because he's in love with Aaron, but it's in an obsession way. She is not seeing him as a bad because he's a male. It's nothing to do with his sexuality. It's nothing to do with the fact he likes her. It's literally, and we explore psychological themes in that anyway. So I go into that. Whereas the main character in Hayfield Manor, she is accused of being a psychopath, and you don't know if she is or not, and she's certainly not a good person, but the detective falls in love with her. She falls in love with her main suspect, because she is everything that you would want in a she's successful, she's like Renaissance, Mr. Darcy sort of thing, but she's actually also got a very, very not nice part of her character, and obviously I'm lucky with Bedazzled that they allow me to do that, because they're not actually predominantly lesbic, they want strong women, so they want art, and they're a literary publisher. I'm allowed to do that. I'm allowed the freedom. Whereas when I have written for lesbic, I get slammed because I can't do cardboard boxes things. You know, I find it hard. Not people do it, but if you don't do it genuinely and authentically as you when you write that character, if that's not you, it shows, I think. Whereas people who write lesbic and they are in those genres and they've created a genuine character because of that, and they can do that within those borders. That's when it is brilliant. You know, I mean, you look at Radcliffe, you look at your Karen Calmaker, you look at your Georgia Beers and your Melissa Bravens, and they do it with aplomb. You know, they are fantastic. Whereas I'm not them. That's not me. My characters are too naughty to no, they don't skin people.
We keep focusing on
yeah, we keep talking about
skin.
She scars you for life.
Yeah, clearly. You've had an effect.
She should have a trigger thing.
Yeah.
Just have a trigger
You need a trigger warning.
Yeah.
You feel like you should all come with a trigger warning.
Yeah,
Probably,
absolutely.
Definitely. I would have said the same. I think you're all coming across as such really impressive personalities and writers, and I'm really happy that you do what you do. And I'm sure everybody here agrees. These are fascinating individuals, giving us fascinating books and fascinating heroes and villains and whatever's in between. So everybody just please give a round of applause. Sam Skyborn, Robin Nix and Jodie Clare, thank you for coming. And yeah, so there is stuff going on. There's 5 Leaves